This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. They've got an amazing loyalty program and an easy-to-use and robust buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMudsta, your first purchase of MTG Sealed and Singles will be 5% off. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the Generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's Patreon shoutout is for Brian Needy. Thanks for supporting the channel, Brian. Now let's get into it. Today's game finds John, Matt, and Arja rejoining me. We've got some new decks and a lot of fun. In today's game, John is taking his Queza deck out again, keeping a Plains, Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose, Vesuva, Esper Sentinel, Godless Shrine, Consecrated Sphinx, and a Mystic Remora. Matt is playing his War Doctor and Clara deck, keeping Belborca, Spectral Sergeant, Priest of Fellrights, Path of Ancestry, Dockside Extortionist, Necropotence, Mountain, and a Magmatic Channeler. I am playing my newly built Nixilis Captive Kingpin, keeping Mountain, Vesuva, Grima Wormtongue, Soul Ring, Swamp, Falconwrath Noble, and a Red Elemental Blast. Last but not least, Arja has teamed up with the dynamic duo of Rograkh and Tymna, keeping an Ash Barrens, Isolated Chapel, Verdant Catacombs, Vampiric Tutor, White Plume Adventurer, Jailbreak, and Karmic Guide. John wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Godless Shrine untapped, taking 2 so that he can cast an Esper Sentinel. Matt plays a tap Path of Ancestry and passes to me. I draw and play Urborg, and then tap it for a black to cast Soul Ring. Arja just plays a Verdant Catacombs and passes back to John. John plays an island and then casts an Arcane Signet. He then taps the Signet to cast Mystic Remora and passes to Matt. Matt's got a Mountain for turn, and then casts Magmatic Channeler. He scries one from the Path of Ancestry, and once he's done that, passes to me. I draw and play a Mountain, and then cast Nixilis. I pass, and during my end step, Arja cracks his fetch to find a Blood Crypt, and then basic land cycles and Ash Barrens to go and find a swamp. Arja draws and plays a Concealed Courtyard, passing to John. John pays the 1 to keep Mystic Remora around, and draws for turn. He plays a Plains, and casts Veto, and passes to Matt. Matt draws, and taps 2 for Talisman of Conviction, but doesn't pay for either of John's taxes, and John gets to draw 2. With nothing else, Matt passes. I draw and play a Swamp. I cast Falconwrath Noble, and then go to combat. I swing Nixilis at John, dealing 4, and pass. On my end step, Arja casts Vampiric Tutor, losing 2 to find a card to put on top. Arja plays an Isolated Chapel for turn, and then plays a White Plume Adventurer, which as it comes in, gives him the initiative. This tutors him a basic to hand, and he passes to John after that. John doesn't pay for the Mystic Remora this turn, and sacrifices it and draws for turn. He plays a Flooded Strand, and then sacrifices it to find a Hollowed Fountain untapped, losing a total of 3. And by sacrificing his fetch land, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on top of Nixilis, and exile my top card, which is Sir Conrad. He then plays a Body of Knowledge, and passes to Matt. Matt's turn has him swinging the Magmatic Channeler, and he hits Arja to get the initiative. He goes to find a basic land, which he then plays so he doesn't miss his land drop. And since Arja only took 1, I get to add another counter on top of Nixilis, and exile another card. In his post-combat main phase, Matt then casts the War Doctor, and passes. I draw, and play a Mountain. I then play Sir Conrad from exile, and move to combat. I swing Nixilis at Matt, dealing 6, and get to steal the initiative, which lets me go and find a Mountain. I put it to hand, and pass to Arja. Arja plays a Mountain for turn, and then taps 4 for Smothering Tithe. He doesn't pay the 1 for the Esper Sentinel, letting John draw a card. John's got a Swamp for turn after not paying for the Smothering Tithe, and Arja makes a treasure. John then plays a Consecrated Sphinx, but I respond with Red Elemental Blast, but don't pay the 1 for the Sentinel. John draws the card, and the Sphinx is then countered. Matt's turn has him playing a Swamp. He then reanimates the newly countered Consecrated Sphinx. With a creature leaving the graveyard, Sir Conrad triggers dealing 1 to my opponents, which has me exiling a card and adding a counter to Nixilis. With a card being exiled, this gives Matt War Doctor a counter as well. And once that's done, follows up with a Dockside Extortionist, making 7 treasures. He then cashes them in immediately and plays Ruinous Ultimatum. It resolves, and everyone takes 4 from my Sir Conrad triggers, and I then deal the 4 triggers from the Falconwrath Noble to Matt. Going to combat, Matt then swings the War Doctor at me for 3, and he takes the initiative. As he moves rooms, he scries 2, and then passes after that. I draw and play a Swamp. I then cast a Cryptghast and pass. Arja plays a Jailbreak in his main phase, giving me Sir Conrad and getting back Smothering Tithe for himself. He then plays a Swamp for turn and casts Phyrexian Arena, passing to John. Before leaving his upkeep, John casts a Mystical Tutor and goes to find Peer into the Abyss, putting it on top and then drawing it for turn. He then casts Queza, and once his commander resolves, plays a Vesuva, which comes in as a copy of Godless Shrine. Matt's turn has him drawing and playing a Plains. He then casts Exquisite Blood, and he goes to combat. He swings the Consecrated Sphinx at Arja, and the Dockside at me. I don't block the Extortionist, and I take 1 while Arja takes 4. With nothing else, Matt passes. I draw and play a Mountain for turn. I then cast an Expedition map, and then recast Ob Nixilis and pass to Arja. Arja draws 1 and loses 1 on his upkeep, and then draws for turn, and I get a Nixilis trigger, exiling Sword of the Anime. He then plays a Loyal Apprentice, and casts Tymna once he's done that. Moving to combat, Arja makes a Thopter token, and swings it at John, and the Loyal Apprentice goes at me. I declare no blocks, and John and I take our hits. Arja then pays 2 life from Tymna in his post-combat main phase, and draws 2 cards, and passes turn. John draws and plays Peer into the Abyss on himself in his main phase. Matt responds by activating Magmatic Chandler, but reveals no instance. John then does the math, cutting his life total in half and loses 13, but draws 40 cards and deals 40 to Matt. John also gains 40 life from Queza, and since each instance is 1 life loss, I actually exile my top 40 cards from Ob Nixilis and add that many +1/+1 counters for each Queza ping. Arja also gets in on the action, making a ton of treasures from the Smothering Tithe. Sadly for John, because of the Exquisite Blood, Matt actually gains enough life to stay alive, and he also draws a bunch of cards because of the Consecrated Sphinx, seeing John draw all those cards as well. And John then follows up his massive draw by playing a Command Tower, then casting Soul Ring, then casting Thought Vessel. He passes after that. During his end step, Arja casts Kolgan's Command to deal 2 to Matt and chooses to return the White Plume Adventurer to hand. Matt responds with a Cling to Dust on the White Plume Adventurer, but John uses Force of Negation to counter it and stop him from gaining life. Matt then plays Entomb and puts Asmodeus into his graveyard, and Sir Conrad sees this happening, dealing 1 to everyone. This has Matt gaining enough life from the Exquisite Blood to live through this Kolgan's Command. Matt continues through the initiative, making a 4/1 skeleton on his upkeep, and then draws with a massive hand thanks to the Consecrated Sphinx drawing a bunch of cards because of John. He then plays a Soul Ring, and then casts Swiftfoot Boots. He then casts Dark Ritual, and uses that mana to cast Veto. Matt attempts to equip Veto with the Swiftfoot Boots, but I respond by casting Chaos Warp on the Exquisite Blood. He shuffles it into his library, and reveals his top card, showing the table in Underworld Breach, which comes into play. He then uses the Breach to recast the Dark Ritual from his graveyard after exiling the appropriate amount of cards, and then plays a Command Tower for turn. He then uses the Dark Ritual mana to play and equip a Basilisk Collar onto the War Doctor, and he goes to combat. He swings the Doctor at John, and uses the War Doctor's trigger to take out Queza, and gains him 3 life. Matt also deals 3 to John from the combat damage, and jumps up to a healthy 8. In his post-combat main phase, Matt then plays a Dothy Voidwalker, and he goes to pass. He moves to his end step, discarding 4 creatures from his massive hand, and Sir Conrad deals 4 to everyone. I draw and play a Swamp from my massive pile of exiled cards. I then also cast from exile a Chandra's Ignition and target Nixilis. But Matt has the Swords to Plowshares, targeting my commander. He gets exiled, and I jump up to 82 life, but my Ignition fizzles. I then pay 1 black for a Disciple of the Vault, and extort it, dealing 1 to everyone and gaining 3. I followed that up with an Orcish Bowmasters, dealing 1 to Matt. And then activate Sir Conrad. At this point I've forgotten about the Voidwalker on the field, so all the cards just get exiled. Moving to combat, I swing Sir Conrad and Cryptcast at John, who connect, and I then pass turn. Arja draws 1 on his upkeep from the arena, losing 1, and then draws a card for turn. I deal 1 to Matt with the Bowmasters from his second card draw, and add another counter to my army. Arja then goes to combat, and makes a Thopter token. He swings the 2 Thopters at me, and the Loyal Apprentice at John. We take our hits, and in his second main phase, Arja loses 2 from Tymna to draw 2. Matt also gets 2 Consecrated Sphinx triggers, and I get 3 Bowmaster triggers. I put 1 on Matt, and sadly Matt hasn't drawn anything to save himself. After all that, Arja then plays a Sign in Blood, losing 2 more life and drawing 2 more cards, and I ping him again for another 2 with the Bowmasters and add more counters to my army. We then remember that Arja got the initiative, so he scries 2, and then replays the White Bloom Adventurer, going deeper into the Undercity. He goads the Orcish Bowmaster, and then plays a Carrion Feeder and sacrifices the Adventurer. Once that's done, he casts a Karmic Guide and brings back the Adventurer, moving again into the Undercity and drawing a card. This has the Bowmaster pinging Arja again, and he drops down to 1, and with nothing else, Arja passes turn. John draws and plays an Omniscience. This puts Arja in a king-making position, as he can take out John by sacrificing treasures, in the hopes that I'll use the Disciple of the Vault triggers to take him out, leaving himself all but dead on my next turn. On the other hand, John has a ton of combos in his hand since he drew half of his library. At this point, having felt bad that John missed his win last time with Queza, Arja decides to let him play it out, and knowing when we're beat, Arja and I scoop it up to John's deck. Game review time. This video was 56 minutes and 24 seconds, and it was one of the first times I got to play my Nixilis deck. I was pretty happy with it, although having Queza across from me was probably very helpful, since each of the instances of Queza's triggered Nixilis, which as you saw, resulted in a massive flying tramply demon. It was a real shame I wasn't able to kill everyone with Chandra's Ignition, but Matt had some timely removal. Overall, I think Matt had a lot of decent stuff going on, and a lot of these decks played really well off each other, since so many of my cards were exiled, which in turn triggered the War Doctor. Arja, however, had a little bit of trouble, since his Rograkh and Tymna deck didn't seem to want to get going too much. He drew a bunch of cards, but unfortunately just wasn't finding an answer to things, and found himself in a really difficult position at the end of the game. I don't envy him, since he was either guaranteed to die to John, or me, so basically he had to pick who he wanted to win. John's deck was sweet, and Peer into the Abyss is a fantastic card. As you saw, he also casted Lizd's Mastery, which is another great card to see in action. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.